Close your eyes for a second. It is the 3rd week of July. You walk across your gravel yard toward the barn. The sun has been sitting on that tin roof since 6 this morning, and it is now 2 in the afternoon. You grab the latch, you pull open the door, and the air that hits your face is cool. Not air-conditioned cool, not fan cool, just steady, like walking into a cave, like the earth itself exhaled. 55 degrees. Your cattle are calm, your feed is dry, your milk is cold, and your power bill this month, 0. That barn exists. I have been inside one, and by the time this video is done, you will know exactly how to build one yourself, for less than $300, using a technique that was quietly buried in a government archive in 1985, and has not been discussed in public since. Here is what I am going to show you today. There is a cooling method that predates electricity, predates refrigeration, and predates every HVAC unit your contractor has ever quoted you. It works in Georgia heat, and it works in Canadian winters. It works on a brand new barn, and it works on the one your great-uncle built with rough-cut lumber in 1958. The materials cost around $300 at any farm supply store. The installation takes 1 afternoon, and once it is done, it requires almost 0 maintenance for the rest of your life. I am going to walk you through the full build. I am going to tell you why you have never heard of this, and I am going to show you the one modification discovered in a handwritten diary from 1847 that pushes a 55-degree barn all the way down to 48 degrees. Cold enough to keep milk fresh for a week, cold enough to cure meat, cold enough to store seed grain through an entire summer without a single watt of power. Stay with me, because this is not a trick. This is physics, and it has been working quietly underground in more ways than one for nearly 200 years. Let me start with something the U.S. Geological Survey has known and documented since 1965. 6 feet below your boots, the temperature of the soil does not change. It does not matter if it is -10 in Minnesota or 102 in Central Texas. At 6 feet of depth, the Earth holds a steady temperature between 52 and 58 degrees Fahrenheit, season after season, decade after decade, century after century. It is one of the most reliable thermostats on the planet, and it is already installed under every single acre of land you own. That is not a theory. That is a measurement, confirmed repeatedly across 42 states, in datasets going back over 60 years. Now here is the simple question that almost nobody asks. If the ground beneath your feet is a constant 55 degrees, why are you paying $1,200 a year to a power company to approximate that same temperature inside your barn? The answer is not technical. The answer is economic. And we will get to that part of the story shortly, because it is not a comfortable story. But first, let me show you the mechanism. The principle is called passive earth-air heat exchange. Big name, simple idea. You dig a trench, 6 feet deep, running from outside your barn to inside at least 100 feet long, sloping gently downward toward the building at 1/4 inch per foot. Inside that trench, you lay a single rung of unglazed clay tile pipe or corrugated drainage pipe, 8 inches in diameter. The outside end terminates in a shaded wooden hood, covered with 1/4 inch hardware mesh. This is your air intake. The inside end opens through the floor of the barn, usually behind a low wooden baffle near the animal stalls. Here is what happens when the outside air temperature hits 95 degrees. Hot air enters the intake. It travels the length of that buried pipe. The earth surrounding the pipe, sitting at a steady 55 degrees, absorbs the heat directly out of the moving air. By the time that air reaches the inside opening, it has dropped nearly 40 degrees. It enters your barn at 55. Steady, consistent. Meanwhile, the warm air already inside the barn rises naturally toward the roof vent, a simple ridge cupola, and exits. That rising air creates a pressure drop. That pressure drop pulls more cool air through the trench. No motor, no thermostat, no electricity. Just hot air rising and cool air moving in to fill the space it left behind. The same principle that has driven weather systems across this planet since before human beings existed. The only reason you need fans and HVAC units is that someone, at some point, convinced you that you did. The old order Amish communities that settled in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania in the early 1700s, had 2 absolute constraints: no electricity and no option to fail. Their animals had to survive August. Their milk had to stay cold. Their seed grain had to stay dry through a humid summer. And they had to solve all of it without any of the mechanical infrastructure that modern farmers now consider non-negotiable. So they looked down. The cooling trench they developed drew directly from techniques brought over from the Rhine Valley and the Palatinate region of Germany, where similar earthwork ventilation had been used in root cellars and stone farmhouses for generations before emigration. The Amish refined it. They standardized it. They passed it from father to son, from barn-raising crew to barn-raising crew, entirely through demonstration and memory. No pamphlet, no manual, just a grandfather pointing at a depth mark scratched into a shovel handle. 6 feet, always 6 feet. In 1923, an agricultural researcher at the University of Nebraska named Laura Neubauer published a small academic bulletin documenting ground temperatures across Midwest farmland. His findings confirmed the 6-foot depth as the point of thermal stability, the exact depth the Amish had been using for over 80 years, without a single instrument to verify it. He noted in his report that these communities had arrived at the precise optimal specification through what he described as generations of careful, unrecorded observation. He was, by his own account in that bulletin, genuinely astonished. That bulletin was reprinted twice in 1924 and again in 1927, and then it vanished. By 1935, the Rural Electrification Administration was being built out of Washington. The plan was simple: run a wire into every American farm, power the future, sell the electricity, sell the appliances, sell the machinery. Passive systems, systems that required no ongoing purchase, no service contract, no replacement parts, were not part of that plan. They were not banned outright. They were simply never mentioned again. The extension offices stopped distributing information about earth cooling techniques. The agricultural colleges pivoted their research toward electrified solutions. And within a generation, the knowledge had been replaced with a different kind of infrastructure, one that arrived with a monthly bill. In 1978, during the energy crisis, the Department of Energy commissioned a study into what they called passive geothermal cooling for agricultural buildings. The lead researcher documented the Amish cooling trenches in detail across multiple counties. His final report, completed in 1983, concluded that earth-coupled passive ventilation could cut agricultural cooling costs by over 90% compared to mechanical refrigeration, and could be retrofitted to virtually any existing structure. That report was designated for distribution to every county extension office in the country. It was never distributed. By 1985, it had been reclassified to limited circulation. By 1989, it had been removed from the public archive entirely. A Freedom of Information Act request filed in 2007 by a small, homesteading publication eventually retrieved the internal memo explaining the decision. The memo described the report's findings as a, quote, significant disruption risk to the residential and agricultural HVAC manufacturing sector. Let me say that plainly. They did not suppress the report because it was wrong. They suppressed it because it worked. A $300 trench that needed no servicing, no replacement parts, and no electricity was not a viable commercial product. It could not generate repeat revenue, and so it was quietly removed from the conversation. The Amish kept digging anyway. They did not receive the extension office pamphlets. They did not attend the university seminars. They just kept doing what their grandfathers had done, and their barns stayed cool. Here is everything you need to install one of these systems. The trench itself needs to be 6 feet deep and at least 100 feet long. The minimum run of 100 feet gives the air enough contact time with the surrounding earth to drop the full 40 degrees. Shorter runs give you partial cooling. The full run gives you the full effect. Pipe diameter is 8 inches for a barn up to 1,000 square feet. Scaled to 10 or 12 inches for larger structures. Standard corrugated drainage pipe from any farm supply store works. Unglazed clay tile is better if you can source it. It breathes slightly and adds a small additional cooling effect through surface evaporation. Slope is non-negotiable, a 1/4 inch of drop per foot, running downward toward the barn. This ensures that any condensation forming inside the pipe drains inward and does not sit in the line and grow stagnant. The outside intake sits on the shaded north or east side of the property, the side that receives the least direct sun. Build a small wooden hood over the opening. Cover the mouth with hardware cloth. Keep it low to the ground, painted dark, to blend in. The inside opening comes up through a dirt floor, or through a single hole cut in a concrete floor at grade level. A low wooden baffle, basically a short 3-sided box, open at the top directs the cool air across the floor before it resides into the barn space. At the ridge of the roof, install or open an existing cupola vent. This is your exhaust. Hot air exits here. Cool air enters at the floor. The thermal differential drives the circulation automatically. Total materials: pipe, gravel bedding for the first foot of backfill, hardware cloth, basic lumber for the hood and baffle. Total cost: approximately $300. Installation time with a rented mini excavator: 1 day. The excavator rental runs around $200. One person can operate it. If your barn is already standing and you cannot run pipe under the foundation, use what Amish communities call the side entry approach. The trench runs alongside the building instead of beneath it, terminating at a basement window frame, a crawlspace vent, or a low sidewall opening cut at floor level. The specifications are identical. 6 feet deep, 100 feet minimum, quarter-inch slope. The only difference is the entry point. Instead of coming up through the floor, the pipe enters through an exterior wall at ground level, sealed with hydraulic cement. The baffle sits just inside the opening. This method works on any standing structure: a barn your grandfather built in 1952, a stone root cellar, a converted outbuilding, any structure with a wall you can put an 8-inch hole through. Now, the part I almost did not include in this video, because when I first heard it from an Amish farmer named Samuel in Holmes County, Ohio, I thought he was exaggerating. He was not. The cooling trench on its own brings your barn to 55 degrees. The Amish discovered sometime in the mid-1800s that adding a single additional element inside the trench drops incoming air temperature by another 7 to 10 degrees, all the way down to 48, refrigerator temperature, year-round from a piece of unglazed clay. Here's what they figured out. At the midpoint of the trench run, 50 feet from either end, they dig a small side chamber into the trench wall. Inside that chamber, they place a single, unglazed terracotta jar filled with rainwater and sealed with a wooden plug. Unglazed terracotta weeps moisture slowly through its walls. As air passes through the trench, it picks up that evaporating moisture. Evaporation absorbs heat from the air. The already cooled air drops another 7 to 10 degrees before it ever reaches the barn. This principle, evaporative cooling combined with ground temperature exchange, was eventually described in a 1968 University of Arizona research paper on greenhouse cooling. The researchers confirmed the mathematics, but never connected it to the Amish trenches that had been running the same system for over a century before their paper was published. The earliest written record I can trace of this technique appears in the journal of an Amish bishop from Lancaster County, dated 1847. He documented that his barn's milk room was holding 48 degrees through a July heat wave that drove his neighbor's surface spring houses above 60. One unglazed terracotta jar, approximately $18 at any garden center, sold today as an Olia irrigation pot. Fill it with rainwater once or twice a year. That is the entire maintenance schedule. 48 degrees. Forever. No electricity, no compressor, no bill. There is a kind of knowledge that does not live in documents. It lives in the depth of a shovel mark on a wooden handle, in the memory of a grandfather standing at the bottom of a fresh trench, pressing his hand against the cool earth, and nodding, in a barn that has held the same temperature through every summer and every winter for the last 110 years. That knowledge was not destroyed. It was just rerouted around the pamphlets, around the electrification programs, around the service contracts, and the quarterly maintenance visits, into the hands of communities that never trusted the wire in the first place. And now it is in your hands. A $300 trench, an $18 clay jar, a barn that holds 48 degrees through July with nothing running in the background but physics. Your great-grandfather knew this, or someone in his community did. It was the standard before the standard changed. Go walk your property this weekend. Find the north or east side. Find the shaded ground. Mark out 100 feet. Because what you do with that 100 feet will change every summer you spend on this land. And every summer the person who inherits it spends here after you. If this video gave you back something you did not know was gone, subscribe to this channel. Not as a favor to me, because it puts you in a room with thousands of other people who are quietly remembering what their families used to know. Drop a comment below. Tell me whether you have ever seen one of these trenches on an old farm. Tell me whether your grandparents talked about keeping the barn cool without power. I read every one. And next week I am going to show you the Amish method for holding a root cellar at 38 degrees through August, using a single copper pipe, a specific variety of shade tree planted at a precise distance from the cellar door, and a technique that has not failed on one particular farm in rural Ohio since 1893. That video drops next Tuesday. Until then, go look at the dirt under your boots. Everything you need is already there. It always was.